كذا شيخ يكون استوى.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد. اللهم افتح علينا فتوح العارفين، ووفقنا توفيق الصالحين الصادقين، وعد علينا بعوائدك الحسنى يا أكرم الأكرمين. Today, inshallah, we'll be talking about the Persian Empire as well as what happened in India before the life of the Prophet ﷺ. But before I do that, I want to remind us all why we're looking into the state of the world before the Prophet ﷺ. The reason for it, as the scholars say, وَبِضِدِّهَا تَتَمَيَّزُ الْأَشْيَاء. By opposites, we understand the realities of things. If you understand nighttime, then you understand daytime. If you understand cold, then you understand hot. And in the same exact way, if you understand darkness, then you understand light. And so we said last time that Umar radiallahu anhu, we said, مَنْ لَمْ يَعْرِفِ الْجَاهِلِيَّةَ لَمْ يَعْرِفِ الْإِسْلَامِ. Whosoever doesn't know the time before Islam, the time of ignorance, that person can never truly know Islam. And then we mentioned a few things about the Roman Empire. And we said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He looked at the people of the earth and He hated them all, the Arabs and the non-Arabs, except a few people that were on the religion of Ahlul Kitab, that were on the true religion of Ibrahim, Musa and Isa alayhi salam. And then we mentioned a few things about the Romans. We said that these were a people that were afflicted with provocative art, they were afflicted with adultery, social injustice. We mentioned that they went through high prices of items. There was a lot of taxes which led to adultery. When young people can't get married, then where do they go? They go towards adultery. This led to many children being born that had no father figures in their lives, so on and so forth. And we mentioned that the Prophet ﷺ told us that you will follow in those people's footsteps, the Christians and the Jews, until you follow them into the hole. And that's why Rasulullah ﷺ, he told us that when you find somebody that is good in his character and his akhlaq, then marry him off. And then we talked about the idea of when they would put their slaves in stadiums and let animals eat them. We talked about how they would look at women and they would say women are a creature without a soul, women are dirty. And then we looked at the opposite, the example of the Prophet ﷺ, in which he ﷺ, when it came to his daughter, he would sit her in his spot. And he would cry when he got too old to do that. And he ﷺ, when it came to his slaves and the people around him that were servants, he would say, first and foremost, free them. But if you can't free them, then feed them from your own clothes. Feed them from your own food, clothe them from your own clothes, and treat them exactly how you would treat your own family members. That's what we learned from Rasulullah ﷺ. Now we move on to the next group, and that is the Persians. The Persians, these people, they followed a religion called Zoroastrianism. This religion was called Zoroastrianism. In Arabic, we call it Majusiya. And this was primarily in the area known as Iran and Iraq today. These people, what did they worship? Many times we think that they worshiped the fire. They did not worship the fire. These people, they worshipped a god of light, and they said that there is a god of darkness as well. They believed in something called duality, which means that there's a god of light and a god of evil, and both of these gods are going to fight till the day of judgment, and eventually the god of light will win. Why did they create these two gods in their minds, at least? It's because of the fact that they did not know what to do with the issue of evil. Right? Many young Muslims, they ask the question, how can Allah let this happen? And the way that these people dealt with it is by creating another god. That was their solution to this question. The second thing about them was that these people, they revered the four elements: fire, wind, earth, water. They did not worship these elements. They revered them. So in part of their worship, you'll see that today still there are Zoroastrians in Iran, but they live in the mountainous regions. They're still there. The Majus are still there. What do? They use the fire as a means of worshiping their God. They say that the fire represents our God. right? In the same exact way that the people that worship idols would say that the idols are a way for us to worship Allah. All of it is still wrong. The second thing about them is that their social situation. Their social situation was so horrible that these people used to marry their own maharim. A man would marry his own sister, his own daughters, his own aunts. In fact, the emperor, the Kisra, he could take anybody's wife and say, that's my wife now. He could steal anybody's wife as whenever he wanted. And in fact, the person known as Kisra Muzdajil al-Thani, or Khosrow II, he married his own daughter. He married his own daughter. And eventually he killed that daughter as well. The Brahmin Shobin, who was one of their generals, he married his own sister, whose name was Gori. So all of these people, they were marrying their own family members, their own blood. And in fact, what was so horrible about their situation was that if the Kisra was sitting in a spot, then all the ministers and cabinet members had to sit at least 5 meters away from the emperor. How far? 5 meters away from the emperor. And the messengers and ambassadors, people of the second class, had to sit 15 meters away. And they had to put masks on. You know, if you go on Google's Zoroastrians, they always wear a white mask. That is so that their breath would not fill the air that the emperor was breathing. This is how, you know, you're thinking like this is crazy, but this is the religion of a group of people, right? And the worst part of all of this is that they would worship their emperor. They worship the god of light, right? But at the same time, they would say the spirit or the divinity of the god of light goes to our emperor. And when they would enter into the emperor's palace, the way that they would enter is that they would enter bowing down. And they were not allowed up until the emperor said you can lift your head up. You know how many people died because of this? They died because the emperor would never give them the order to get up. The blood would rush to their head, and you know, you talk about the long sajda of the imam. Look, imagine this, right? So this is the situation that they were put into. And these people, they had 7 levels of society. They had the Kisra at the top, the ruler. Then they had 7 noble families, the Ashraf. Then they had the clerics, their clergy, their scholars, you could say, the religious men. And then they had their warriors, then their culture and merchants, and their tax collectors and farmers. And finally, they had their Persian servants and slaves. And the Persian servants and slaves were 90%
to my house, her dad said
of their
yes.
nation. Now, compare all of this.
No, like when we
How they
had to go
would
kindergarten,
be
like,
around
my
their
friend comes to my
emperor,
house.
compare how they would be in terms of being slaves and so on and so forth, to the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ, when he met a person, he would shake their hand like this. He would turn his whole body, and he would not turn away until that person themselves was ready to turn away. That's how much respect he gave. And the Prophet ﷺ didn't do this only for adults. He did it for the smallest of children as well. This is the comparison that you're looking at. This is what the Persian emperor was like, and this is how Rasulullah ﷺ was like. And both these empires, the Roman, Byzantine Empire, and Persian Empire, had a lot of infighting. We know Surah Al-Rum is about their fighting. Alif Lam Mim Ghulibat Al-Rum, and you can look up the Tafsir about it. The last land that we're going to speak about before we speak about the Arabian Peninsula is actually the land known as India. Now, classically, many of the scholars of Seerah don't talk about India. The reason why they don't talk about India is because many of the writers of Seerah wrote in Arabic, and their primary audience was people that were living in the Arab lands, in Persia, or living in the Byzantine lands, or living in the Arabian Peninsula, or in North Africa. They never discussed India. The reason for this is because they didn't have a need to. But now, many of us are from that part of the world. We're from Pakistan, we're from India, and so for us it's very important to understand where we came from and understand why it's so important that we as Muslims have Islam. And so, the Hindus, they believed in multiple gods. The Buddhists, on the other side, at the beginning of their religion, when their religion started, it did not center around the concept of a God. It centered around the concept of spirituality. It was a spiritual way of life, you could say. But eventually what ended up happening is that they began to venerate the Buddha himself, to the degree that they venerate the Dalai Lama today still. And what's so interesting is that some of the lexicon scholars say this, I don't know whether it's true or not, that the Urdu word for Bhut, it actually comes from the word Buddha. This is according to some scholars, right? So this is one situation, that these people worship multiple gods, they worship stones and so on and so forth. On top of this, in India, up until British rule, the situation of women was probably the worst situation in all of the lands, without fail. A common Indian woman, if her husband passed away, she would have to burn herself on her husband's funeral pyre. And we as Muslims, we're like, oh, well, we're not going to do that. We never did that. But you don't know, your great-great-great-grandfathers, they did that. And your great-great-great-grandmothers, they did that as well. And this was known as the practice of sati, where they would literally, the husband would have passed away, and they would put the wife on top of his body and burn her. Because they said that once the husband passes away, there's no point of her living anymore. And all of this existed in certain parts of India, not in all of India, but under the Mughal rule, the Muslim rule, the leader Akbar, he came and he tried to limit or discourage this practice, but he could not ban it completely. It wasn't until 1829, till the British came and they passed the Bengal Sati regulation, in which they said that it is no longer permissible in the lands that are occupied by the East India Company to do this practice anymore. Imagine, 1829, it's not that far away, it's not 1400 years ago. This is literally just 100 years ago, right? And so they would say that the wife should be so devoted to her husband, right, that it was taken to such cultural and religious extremes. And they called this the idea of pati vrata, which is the Hindu concept of loyalty and fidelity towards your husband, right? They would call it Mazaj Khuda. In Urdu movies, you'll find it. They talk about movies where the husband is like the metaphorical God for the wife. Look what kind of thoughts they have. Once her husband goes, her purpose goes. So this was the situation of these women. Now, the next thing is that they had the caste system. And what's funny about the caste system is that you might think it doesn't exist anymore. It still exists. It's still there. You can go read any article on English, Urdu, Hindi, whatever it is, and you'll find that there are tons of articles still talking about this situation in certain rural parts of India, where there are different groups of people based off of what's known as their karma and dharma, which is their work and their duties and so on and so forth, that these people were not even allowed to marry between different classes. If you're from a certain group, you're not allowed to marry this person. At the top of them, they had the Brahmins, the religious class, the priests, the intellectuals, the bourgeoisie, the aristocrats. At the middle, the next level, they had the Kshatriyas. The Kshatriyas are the warrior class, right? The third level is the Vaishyas, which are the artisans, the farmers, the merchants. Then they have the Shudras, which are the labor class. And then at the bottom of all of it is the Dalit. And these people are what are known as the untouchables in India today, right? And what's so interesting is that still today, thousands of these people are killed on a yearly basis in India. Why? They look a little bit different. Why? They were born in a different family. Why? Because somebody decided to say, you are less than. Every day, 6 women from amongst their women is raped every day in India today. Imagine, right? This is the situation that is not in the past, it's still today, right? And the last thing is that they have the concept of samsara, which is the concept of reincarnation. Why am I telling you all of this? Is so that we understand that the darkness has not ended. The darkness existed for the Romans, it existed for the Persians, it existed for the Indians still till today. And this is why when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, إِنَّ اللَّهَ نَظَرَ إِلَىٰ أَهْلِ الْأَرْضِ فَمَقَتَهُمْ عَرَضَهُمْ وَعَجَبَهُمْ إِلَّا بَقَيْنَهُمْ. That when Allah looked at the people of the earth, He hated them, the Arabs and the non-Arabs, except a few people from the book, right? And so this is the situation. Now I'm going to give you a small snippet of the situation of the Arabs. This small snippet will show us the whole discussion together and will give us a preview of the discussion. This snippet has to do with the companion Ja'far ibn Abi Talib. Who knows who Ja'far ibn Abi Talib is? Who can give a guess? Just any guess.
Cousin.
Ja'far ibn Abi Talib is the cousin of the Prophet, but who is he related to?
Abu Talib.
Abu Talib, and who else?
Ali.
Ali. What is his relationship to Ali?
Brothers.
He's his brother. So he says that when they went to Abyssinia, to Habasha, he talks about the situation of the Arabs. And he says, Ayyuha al-Malik, O Najashi, O the ruler of Abyssinia, O the ruler of Eritrea and Ethiopia, Kunna qawman ahla jahiliyyah, that we were a people of ignorance. We lived in a time of ignorance. Na'bud al-asnam, we used to worship idols. Wa na'kul al-mayta, we would eat carrion. Carrion is dead meat. Right? Today people, they worship their money. Today people eat haram. Situation hasn't changed much. Wa na'kul fawahish, we would go and commit things like adultery, fornication, so on and so forth. These things are still happening. وَنَقْطَعُ الْأَرْحَامِ, and we would break the ties of kinship, the ties of family bonds. Still today, there are people breaking the ties of family bonds. وَنُسِيءُ الْجِوَارِ, we would be bad towards our neighbors. There's still Muslims being bad towards their neighbors. يَأْكُلُ الْقَوِيُّ مِنَّ الضَّعِيفِ, that a strong person would devour the weak person. Today, in organizations, Muslim, non-Muslim, business place, we always have the strong people devouring the weak people. But what's so interesting about this is that Ja'far is saying that when Islam came, all of this changed. But today, Islam, we already have it. Has it changed for us? That's the question that we should be asking while listening to this. And then he says, حَتَّى بَعَثَ اللَّهُ إِلَيْنَا رَسُولًا مِنَّا, until Allah sent to us a prophet from amongst us. نَعْرِفُ نَسَبَهُ, we know who his parents are and his grandparents and where he came from, his lineage. وَصِدْقَهُ, we know his truth. وَأَمَانَتَهُ, we know his trustworthiness. وَعَفَافَهُ, we know that he's chaste, he's pure, he's not one to commit adultery. فَدَعَا إِلَى اللَّهِ, he called towards Allah. لِنُوَحِّدَهُ, so that we would say that Allah is one. We would have tawheed, we would be people of monotheism. وَنَعْبُدُهُ, and we would worship Allah alone. وَنَخْلَعُ مَا كُنَّا نَعْبُدُ, and we would leave and throw away everything else that we used to worship. نَحْنُ وَآبَاؤُنَا مِن دُونِهِ مِنْ الْحِجَارَةِ, that which our fathers and all of us used to worship, other than Allah, that was made from stone. وَالْأَوْثَانِ, sculptures. And what did he do? وَأَمَرَنَا بِصِدْقِ الْحَدِيثِ, that the Prophet told us to be honest when we speak. وَأَدَاءِ الْأَمَانَةِ, he told us to fulfill our trusts. وَصِلَةِ الرَّحْمِ, he told us to make sure that we bring back the family ties of kinship and hold them strong. وَحُسْنُ الْجِوَارِ, that we take care of our neighbors, we're good towards our neighbors. وَالْكَفِّ عَنِ الْمَحَارِمِ, and that we stay away from the haram. وَالدِّمَاءِ, and we stay away from the haram relationships as well, and we stay away from killing other people. وَنَهَانَا عَنِ الْفَوَاحِشِ, he told us to stay away from evil, وَقَوْلِ الزُّورِ, from false speech, وَأَكْلِ مَالِ الْيَتِيمِ, from eating the wealth of the orphans, وَقَذْفِ الْمُحْسَنَةِ, from going to a woman and saying that, oh, you committed adultery without any evidence. By the way, this point, I was in St. Louis, and this is going on the internet, but I'm going to say it anyways. I was in St. Louis and I was speaking to a group of girls. Over 130 girls are there. And the topic that I spoke about is unity and sisterhood in Islam. And one of the reasons why I spoke about that topic is because there were other 13, 14-year-old girls going around and pointing fingers at other girls and saying this girl committed adultery, and this girl has a boyfriend, and this girl has this, and this girl has that. The Prophet ﷺ prohibited us from this. But yet it's happening in our ummah today. وَأَمَرَنَا أَن نَعْبُدَ اللَّهَ وَحْدَهُ, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded us to worship Him alone. لَا نُشْرِكُ بِهِ شَيْئًا, do not associate partners with Him. وَأَمَرَنَا بِالصَّلَاةِ وَالزَّكَاةِ وَالصِّيَامِ, that Allah commanded us to pray and to give zakat and to fast. This is what is the snapshot. That look at how bad they were, and look how Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam changed them. Today, you and me, if I ask you, what are the favors of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam on you? You'll be like, oh, I don't really know what he did for me. These people, they have it memorized verbatim exactly what Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam did for them. And before we actually get to the Arabs, I want to share with you one example. And this example is really amazing. I learned this example actually when I was in Medina University studying Arabic. It's a very beautiful story. And it's a very inspiring story actually. This story, it takes place much after the death of the Prophet ﷺ. It actually happens during the life of Umar radiallahu anhu, in which the Muslims are fighting against the largest empire in the world. And that is the Persian Empire. And this is known as the Battle of Qadisiyah, one of the greatest battles in history. Who is in charge of the Muslims? A companion by the name of Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas. One of the most intelligent companions and most intelligent generals to ever walk the face of this earth. And the second was on the other side. His name was Rustum Farakhzad. Rustum Farakhzad. And in Urdu we say Rustum. Right? Both of these were the generals. Rustum on one side, Sa'ad on one side. And so what ends up happening is that Rustum is an educated man. He's a general. He didn't get his position out of nowhere. He decides that he wants to know what Islam is. And so he sends a letter to Sa'ad, and he says that send me one Muslim, just one Muslim, to tell me what Islam is. I'm going to ask him questions. So what ends up happening is that Sa'ad, he sends one companion. He sends the companion Rib'i ibn Amir. And Rib'i ibn Amir, he goes to Rustum. He enters in on his place. And in the tent of Rustum, you could see that there's majalis, bin namarif, al-mudhaba, al-zarabi, al-harira. There's pillows and there's cushions made of gold thread, that are made of soft material, that are made of silk. وَأَظْهَرُ الْيَوَاقِيتِ وَاللَّآلِ الثَّمِينَ. That there's rubies and sapphires and pearls everywhere. And this is the tent of Rustum, the general of the Persians. وَغَيْرُ ذَلِكَ مِنَ الْأَمْتِعَةِ الثَّمِينَ. And many other amazing pieces of furniture. And guess what? This is not his house. This is in the middle of the battlefield, right? And where is Rustum sitting? He's sitting on a bed made of gold, silk. SubhanAllah. وَعَلَيْهِ تَاجُهُ. Even the general has a crown. And now here comes Rib'i, the companion of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, with ripped up clothes. Safiqa, by the way, it's not even descriptive clothes, it's clothes that are so thick, they're made of wool, that it's like you feel disgusting wearing it. It's very cheap clothing, right? It's very hot to wear. And imagine they're going to different places, they're outside, it's the heat of the Persian lands that they're in. And he has wasayfun, he has his little small sword, وَتُرْسٌ وَفَرَسٌ قَصِيرًا, and he has a small, shield, and he has a little donkey with him. وَلَمْ يَزِلْ رَاكِبَهَا حَتَّى دَاسَ بِهَا طَرَفُ الْبِصَاطِ. That he was dragging his sword. He doesn't even have a place to put his sword. There's something called a sheath. He doesn't even have that, and he's dragging it. Now imagine if you drag a sword across carpet, what does it do? It rips it. It ruins it. Now imagine you're the general on another side, and here's this poor man coming into your tent, and he's ripping your furniture as he goes along. Right? And what does he do? He gets off his animal, he ties it to some of the furniture in the tent of the general. And then he goes towards the general. And he has his armor on, and he has his helmet on, and he has everything on. Now I have a question. When you go up to meet the general of the other side, are you allowed to carry your weapon? You're not allowed to carry your weapon. This is against, God over the principles of law, right? And so, what's the first thing that said to him? ضَعْ سِلَاحَ. Put your sword down. Put your weapons down. And what does he say? إِنِّي لَمْ آتِكَ. I didn't come to you because I wanted to. وَإِنَّمَا جِئْتُكُمْ حِينَ دَعَوْتُمُونِي. I only came because you guys called me. Look at the honor, look at the izzah of the Sahaba. They're standing in front of generals and kings, and here they are with no money, and they're saying, you called me. I didn't come here because I wanted to come. فَإِن تَرَكْتُمُونِي هَكَذَا وَإِلَّا رَجَعْتُ. If you don't leave my weapons on me, I'm going to leave. And then Rustum, he says, "Khalas, idhan lahu." Let him have his weapons on, no problem. And then Rib'i, he sits down and his bow and arrow actually rips another cushion. And then Rustum, he says, "Ma ja'a bikum?" Why have you all come to the Persian lands? Why are you all here? What are you people doing here? Your prophet has already passed away. What do you need from us? And then Rib'i, he says, "Allah ibta'athana linukhrija man sha'a min ibadati al-ibad ila ibadati Allah." That Allah has sent us, meaning the companions, to take whoever is in the worship of the created, in the worship of servants, into the worship of the Creator and the worship of Allah. To take people out of the worship of the created to the worship of the Creator. وَمِن ضِيقِ الدُّنْيَا إِلَى سَعَتِهَا, from the narrowness of this world to the vastness of the hereafter. وَمِن جَوْرِ الْأَدْيَانِ إِلَى عَدْلِ الْإِسْلَامِ, from the injustices that the religions and the traditions and the ways of life the human beings create, to the justice that Islam brings about on earth. فَأَرْسَلْنَا بِدِينِهِ إِلَى خَلْقِهِ لِنَدْعُوَهُمْ إِلَيْهِ, that we were sent with His deen, the deen of Muhammad, the deen of Allah, to His creation to call them. فَمَنْ قَبِلَ ذَلِكَ قَبِلْنَا مِنْهُ, whosoever accepts that from us, we accept from him. وَرَجَعْنَا عَنْهُ, we stop fighting with them. وَمَنْ أَبَى قَاتَلْنَاهُ أَبَدًا, whosoever rejects this and stops our ability to practice our religion and to preach our religion across the land, then we will fight them forever. حَتَّى نَفْدِيَ إِلَى مَوْعُودِ اللَّهِ, until the promise of Allah comes down, until the appointment of Allah comes down. And Rustum, his eyes are getting scared. He's like, look at this companion, look at how he's talking to me. He's like, this poor man is speaking with such high words, and he asks him one question. He says, وَمَا مَوْعُودُ اللَّهِ, what is the appointment of Allah? What is the promise of Allah? He said, الْجَنَّةُ لِمَنْ مَاتْ عَلَى قِتَالِ مَنْ أَبَى, the Jannah for the one who dies fighting the people that deny Allah. وَالظَّفْرُ لِمَنْ بَقِيَ, and success for those that remain behind. And Rustum, when he hears this, he looks to his, his cabinet members and all the other generals and all the leaders in his army and the second in command, the lieutenants, and he said, قَدْ سَمِعْتَ مَقَالَتَكُمْ, that I've heard what he said. I've heard what he said. Do you guys all hear it as well? He's telling the people in his room. And he says to this Muslim, فَهَلْ لَكُمْ أَن تُؤَخِّرُوا هَذَا الْأَمْرَ حَتَّى نَنْظُرَ فِيهِ وَتَنْظُرُوا, that is it okay if we delay this battle for a little bit of time to see what I should do and what you should do? Like, can I have some time to decide on what I should do based off of what you just told me? And Rib'i, he's a companion, he has an open heart. He says, no problem, yes. كَمْ أَحَبُّ إِلَيْكُمْ, how much time do you guys want? Yawm or yawman? You want 1 or 2 days before we crush you? Right? The Muslims are a small amount of number, by the way, against this large Persian army. But he said, you need 1 or 2 days until we come and get you. He said, لا بل حتى نكاتب أهل رأينا ورؤوس قومنا, that we need enough time to talk to all of the generals and all of the leaders so that we know what the right decision is before we face the Muslims. And to this Rib'i, he says, ما سمى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أن نؤخر الأعداء عند اللقاء. The Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم told us never to delay fighting the enemy more than 3 days. Right? If you're camped, don't wait more than 3 days. And so, فَانظُرْ فِي أَمْرِكَ وَأَمْرِهِمْ, O General Rustum, go and see what you think and go see what your cabinet members think. وَاخْتَرْ وَاحِدَةً مِنْ ثَلَاثِ بَعْدِ الْأَجَلِ, pick one of the 3 choices. What are the 3 choices? Either you surrender, either we fight, right? Or either you accept Islam. Right? Those are your 3 choices. If you surrender, we're going to come. You can run your country the way you want to. Muslims are not there to take over land. The only thing we're going to ask from you is 2 things. Number 1 is that we get to freely preach Islam in your land. By the way, this is a very important discussion. Right? When we come into your land, we're allowed to freely preach Islam. And your standing army will be disbanded. Your standing army is disbanded, we will be your security guards. You can practice Majusiyya, you can practice Christianity, Judaism, whatever you want. Freedom of religion is there in a Muslim land, by the way. But the only condition is that you don't have a standing army and that you let us talk to people about Islam. These people said, no, we're not going to do that. Okay, are you gonna accept Islam? No, we're not gonna do that either. Are you gonna fight? Okay, that's the option that we choose. And so what ends up happening is that Rustum, he goes to them, Asayyiduhum anta, that, oh Rib'i, oh soldier, are you the general and the master of all these Muslims behind you? Why is he asking him this question? He's asking him this question because of the way he's talking. The way this confidence as a Muslim that's coming out of his mouth, it's as if that only a general can speak like this to another general. And he says, La, I'm not the leader of the Muslims. وَلَكِنَّ الْمُسْلِمُونَ كَالْجَسَدِ الْوَاحِدِ يُجِيرُ أَدْنَاهُمْ عَلَى أَعْلَاهُمْ. That the Muslims are like one body. The top of it protects the bottom, and the bottom of it protects the top. Now, this guy doesn't know what to do. So he turns to his companions, his people, his cabinet members, and he says, هل سمعتم قط أعز وأرجح من كلام هذا الرجل? Have you ever seen anybody speak in a more honorable and more amazing way than this companion of Muhammad? This is a non-Muslim general, Persian, saying this about a Muslim. And guess what they say? They have shaitan filled in their hearts. So they say, Ma'ad Allah. They seek refuge from Allah, even though they don't believe in Allah. And tamila ila shay'in min hada. Like, how could you, O Rustam, our general, lean towards something like that? وَتَدَعْ دِينَكَ إِلَى هَذَا الْكَلْبِ أَمَا تَرَى ثِيَابَهُ. That how can you leave the religion of your forefathers for the religion of this dog? They're calling this companion a dog. Don't you see his clothes? What were they judging this companion based off of? His clothes. Nothing else. And guess what? Rustum is an intelligent general. He says, وَإِلَكُمْ لَا تَنْظُرُوا إِلَى الثِّيَابِ. That don't look to these Muslims' clothes. These people, they don't care about clothes. وَانْظُرُوا إِلَى الرَّأْيِ وَالْكَلَامِ وَالسِّيرَةِ. Look into the way that they express their opinions. Look at how they speak. Look at the intelligence and the eloquence of these people. Look at their seerah. Look at how they live their lives. إن المسلمين يستخفون بالثياب والمأكل ويصومون الأحساب. That these Muslims, they belittle food and clothes. They don't care about it. They're not worldly people. They care about ahsab. They care about the deen. They care about the future. They care about things that actually matter. And so, guess what? Rib'i, he leaves. Now, the general, he says that I want another person to come talk to me. He's like, I'm not done with the Muslims. I need a second opinion. Sometimes you go to a doctor and he gives you the wrong prescription. He says, send me another person. So Sa'ad, he sends another person. Now he sends al-Mughira ibn Shu'bah, radiyallahu anhu. And now, Rustum, he says to him, إِنَّكُمْ جِيرَانُنَا وَكُنَّا نُحْسِنُ إِلَيْكُمْ وَنَكُفُّ الْأَذَى عَنْكُمْ فَارْجِعُوا إِلَى بِلَادِكُمْ. The, oh Mughira, oh companion of Muhammad, that indeed we're your neighbors, we're your friends. We do good towards you. We will never harm you. You guys live in Arabia, we'll live in Persia, no problem. فَارْجِعُوا إِلَى بِلَادِكُمْ. Go back to where you guys came from. وَلَا نَمْنَعْ تِجَارَتَكُمْ مِنَ الدُّخُولِ إِلَى بِلَادِنَا. If you want to do business with us, we're chill, let's do business, let's say make some money together, right? فَقَالَ لَهُ Mughira, the companion of the Prophet ﷺ, he said, إِنَّا لَيْسَ طَلَبُنَا الدُّنْيَا. We're not here to take the dunya from you guys. We don't want the dunya. وَإِنَّمَا هَمُّنَا وَطَلَبُنَا الْآخِرَةِ. We're here to take the akhirah. We're here seeking the akhirah. That's our concern. وَقَدْ بَعَثَ اللَّهُ إِلَيْنَا رَسُولًا بِدِينِ الْحَقِّ. We were sent a prophet with the true religion. لَا يَرْغَبُ عَنْهُ أَحَدٌ إِلَّا ظُلْمٌ. That nobody turns away from this religion except that Allah will humiliate them eventually. وَلَا يَعْتَصِمُ بِهِ إِلَّا عَزْ. And whosoever is a Muslim and grabs hold of this, Allah gives them honor. Remember the statement of Umar when he said, نَحْنُ قَوْمٌ أَعَزَّنَا اللَّهُ بِالْإِسْلَامِ. That we are a people that were honored with Islam. فَإِذِ ابْتَغَيْنَا الْعِزَّةَ بِغَيْرِ الْإِسْلَامِ أَذَلَّنَا اللَّهُ. That if we seek honor anywhere outside of Islam as Muslims, Allah will disgrace us. This is not the same for the non-Muslims, by the way. This is the standard, the sunnah for Allah that's placed for the Muslims only, by the way. That if you turn away from Islam while being a Muslim, Allah will disgrace you. Right? They have another chance until they die. Right? فَقَالَ رُسْتُمْ فَمَا هُوَ. Rustum, he said, now what is this deen? What is this deen that you're talking about? This true religion. Mughira, he says, أَمَّا عُمُودُهُ الَّذِي لَا يُصْبَحُ شَيْءٌ مِّنْهُ إِلَّا بِهِ فَشَهَادَةُ أَنْ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهُ وَأَنَّ مُحَمَّدًا رَسُولُ اللَّهِ. that as for the pillar of our religion, and nothing else will be good. You can be the kindest person on earth. You can be the best non-Muslim on earth. You can make apple pies and pumpkin pies for your neighbors all day long. But until you believe that Allah is one and that Muhammad is his messenger, there is no pillar of religion that will stand for you. وَالْإِقْرَارُ بِمَا جَاءَ مِنْ عِنْدِ اللَّهِ, and affirming everything that Allah has sent. The Torah, the Injil, the Quran, affirming all of that. Rustum, he says, مَا أَحْسَنَهَا, what a beautiful religion this is. This is the general of the Persians saying this. وَأَيُّ شَيْءٍ إِلَّا, what else is so amazing about your religion? Tell me. And then he says, وَإِخْرَاجُ لِعِبَادِ مِنْ عِبَادَةِ الْعِبَادِ إِلَىٰ عِبَادَةِ اللَّهِ, to take out people, to take out the servants, me and you, from the worship of other servants, Jesus, cows, rats, whatever, to the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Creator alone. And then he says, that's good as well. What else? And then he says, وَالنَّاسُ بَنُو آدَمَ. Mughira, he says that all of humanity, all the people on earth, we are the children of Adam alayhi salam. فَهُمْ إِخْوَةٌ لِأَبٍ وَأُمٍ. We are brothers from a father and from a mother, from Adam and Hawa. Brothers from another mother, essentially, that's what he's saying. Right? And then Rustum, he says, Hasan and Ayub, that's good too. What else do you have for me? And, at this point, he said, that's all we have. That's all I'm going to say. And then Rustum, he asked him one question. أَرَأَيْتَ إِنْ دَخَلْنَا فِي دِينِكُمْ أَتَرْجِعُونَ مِنْ بِلَادِنَا, that if we Persians accept your religion, will you run away from us? Will you go away? And the companion says, Wallah, if you all accept Islam, we're not going to fight you. We don't care about your land. We're just here to tell you about Islam. Either you let us do it without fighting, and we get to preach freely, or we fight and beat you, and then we tell you about Islam after that. Right? Either you learn Islam via niceness, or you learn through the danda. Right? Two ways. Right? And so this is the way of the Muslims, right? We will only come back to your country for business or if you have a need. Otherwise, we won't come back. And now, وَلَمَّا خَرَجَ الْمُغِيرَ مِنْ عِنْدِهِ ذَكَرَ رُسْتُمْ رُؤَسَاءَ قَوْمِهِ فِي الْإِسْلَامِ. That after Mughira leaves Rustum, he turns to his people, the cabinet members, and he says, we should just accept Islam. This guy is giving us the best religion in the world. And what do? In Arabic, it's called raising your nose. They raise their nose. This is a sign of saying, we don't want that. We don't want it. We don't want it. وَأَبَوْا أَنْ يَدْخُلُوا فِيهِ. And they said, we're never going to enter into Islam. And right after that, the Muslims went and kicked their butts. Why did I tell you this story? For us to understand that when we learn about the situation of the Arabs, the Persians, and all of these different groups of people, it's so that we understand that the companions, they saw the darkness of the world. And when Islam came, they saw the light of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's what this is about. Otherwise, there's no point about talking about Hindus and Persians and Romans. They're all useless people together. The only thing that matters is Islam. But the reason why we talk about it is so we can understand the darkness in order to understand the light. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq to understand and to value our deen the way that the Sahaba did, and to have confidence the way that the Sahaba did. Inshallah, next time we'll talk about the situation in the Arabian Peninsula and how those people that were once on the religion of Ibrahim alayhi salam began to worship idols, and how they began to engage in illicit relationships and drink alcohol and so on and so forth. All of their vices, as well as the good qualities and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose Muhammad to be from amongst the arrows. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد ان لا اله الا انت نستغفرك ونتوب اليك. جزاكم الله خيرا for your patience. Inshallah, there should be some refreshments outside. If you see anybody